What is up, guys? So some news came out recently about Deathstroke and how often he will reappear on Arrow, and also if we will ever get a spin-off show. And it's not good news, that's for sure. During a recent Comic-Con event, the showrunner behind Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow, Mark Guggenheim, had this to say regarding Deathstroke on Arrow, and I quote, "These are DC's characters. We're just renting them, so we use the characters that they tell us we can use when we use them, and we work around whatever limitations that places us." For a time, they were saying you can't use Deathstroke, and that changed, and we were able to have Slade Wilson back on the show. And now we're back to you can't use him. They're working on the feature film version. It really is sort of now that you've got it. They've got obviously Slade. Spoiler alert, Deathstroke appears at the end of the Justice League movie, end quote. So you can tell that Arrow can't use Deathstroke at the moment. This isn't a permanent thing at all since, like Mark Guggenheim just said, they've done this before. Warner Brothers have done this before. And they've been on and off again as to whether or not Deathstroke can appear on Arrow. But as of right now, for basically probably the entire season of Season 6, he can't appear. And this means he definitely won't be getting the long-requested spin-off show, which has been rumored for a while. Manu Bennett has talked about it, and Manu Bennett said that he has talked about it with Mark Guggenheim. But with this news, there's no way we're getting this show anytime soon, if not ever. The reason that Warner Brothers isn't allowing them to use Deathstroke at the moment is because they think that all their audiences are downright idiots. So they're making their own movie right now with Deathstroke in it, and they think that audience won't be able to tell the difference between the Manu Bennett arrowverse Deathstroke and the Joe Manganiello, I don't know how to pronounce that last name, dceu Deathstroke. Despite the fact that they are clearly two different actors who are in two different universes, who have two different costumes which look distinctly unique from each other, and are also in two different forms of media altogether. But no, audiences won't be able to tell the difference between these two. Just look at the two Quicksilvers in the MCU. People were confusing them non-stop, right? No, nobody thought these two were the same person. Maybe that's because they changed his name in X-Men from Pietro to Peter. Who knows? But I doubt that. I doubt just changing his first name from Peter to Pietro made a big difference as to making them so unique from each other. It was the fact that they changed, that their costumes were vastly different, their personalities were different, their accents were different, their actors were obviously different, the universes were different, and the benefit that the TV show and movies have that they don't have is that they were in the same form of media, while TV shows and movies obviously are not. So you could honestly change one single thing about, or maybe a couple things like they did with the X-Men and MCU versions of Quicksilver with the first name, their costumes, their personalities, and their actors. And you could just change a couple things, which they did with the actor and the costume, and probably this like a slight variation in personalities. So these two will be able to, you'll be able to tell the two apart, just like people were able to tell apart the two Quicksilvers and also the two Flashes from Justice League and the CW. And this isn't a new thing either. The whole reason we can't see characters like Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Shazam, Blue Beetle, etc. is because Warner Brothers is saving them, quote-unquote saving them, for the movies. Which is just ridiculous. I don't understand why you can't just have two versions of a character, one on TV and one in the movies. People will be able to tell the difference. This whole concept was a big factor into why Season 3 of Arrow was such a convoluted mess, because they were planning on using the Suicide Squad as a recurring storyline and also probably a recurring conflict with Team Arrow. But Warner Brothers decided that people wouldn't be able to grasp the concept of two different Suicide Squads, so they forced Arrow to kill off Amanda Waller and Deadshot and not use Harley Quinn, which they were actually planning to do because she had a small tiny cameo in Season 2. So they couldn't use her at all, and they killed off Deadshot and Amanda Waller because of the movie. And we traded all that for this movie, Suicide Squad. That is not a fair trade. I want my CW Suicide Squad back because it was so much better. Also, you could have just done this simple fix to this, called the CW version Task Force X at all times, and never say Suicide Squad, or just casually say Suicide Squad sometimes, and then the DCEU version called them Suicide Squad, just because the DCEU version has to be more marketable than the CW version. So you could just call them Suicide Squad, and then the one on the CW, Task Force X, so people can easily tell the difference. Because it wasn't easily enough already, because, the actors look nothing alike, the personalities are different. Deadshot is white on the CW, and he's black in the DCEU. It boggles my mind why they did this. There were so many easy fixes to this problem, like calling them Task Force X on a CW, or just thinking, or just not thinking that your audience is a bunch of idiots, because they're not. People can tell the difference between these characters. Now, you might be thinking that there are some DC characters that are still, right now, in both the DCEU and the Arrowverse, like Superman and the Flash. And while, yeah, those two are in both universes, the Flash is really the only one that isn't affected at all by the DCEU. Reason being is probably because he's the main character of his show. I doubt if he was a minor character right now, they would ever let them use him, or only barely, just because they want to focus on where the money is, which is the movies. So the Flash is really the only character unaffected by the DCEU, because Superman is barely ever on Supergirl, and I think that's probably because Warner Brothers are afraid people would confuse Tyler Hoechlin and Henry Cavill's Superman, despite the fact that they have two completely different actors, costumes, universes, personalities, and media. So this issue is definitely not a new one. It's one that's been around ever since the DCEU started its conception in 2013, which is around Season 2 of Arrow. But ever since then, the DCEU has limited the Arrowverse in so many ways, and it infuriates me, really. The fact that they care so much more about the DCEU when nobody really likes the DCEU compared to the Arrowverse, which a lot of people actually love, especially the crossovers. But the fact that they limit it so much infuriates me. And they've been doing that ever since 2013. But I always thought that there were some characters like the Flash and Superman and Deathstroke that were exceptions to the rule. And yeah, I always thought the reason Deathstroke wasn't on Arrow between Season 3 in that one episode and Season 5 was just because of scheduling conflicts, just because Manu Bennett was on another show, so I always thought he couldn't make time for Arrow. But it turns out, I guess I was wrong. I guess he wasn't on Arrow between Season 3 and 4 just because Warner Brothers wasn't allowing it, but I always thought it was because Manu Bennett couldn't make time for it. But it turns out I was definitely wrong, because right now, Deathstroke is completely off limits for Arrow until further notice, which means no more badass Deathstroke fight scenes like the one we got in Season 6, Episode 5, and no more incredible acting from Manu Bennett and any of his dynamics with Oliver. No more two-part Deathstroke stories, which was by far the best part of Season 6, and worst of all, no more hopes for a Deathstroke spin-off in the future, which would have been cool. It would have been awesome to have a Deathstroke spin-off on the new dctv service, so it could be rated R, it could be full gory glory, it could be in its full gory glory, but it turns out no, because they're not allowing Arrow to use Deathstroke. Although, maybe they're not allowing just Arrow to use Deathstroke. Maybe he could get a spin-off show, but seeing as they're doing this because of the movie, I doubt they will ever let Deathstroke even be in a live-action TV show for a while, which means also not on Titans, which is so disappointing. And we're trading all of that, a spin-off show, a possible main villain role on Titans, a Arrow reoccurring role. We're trading all of that for this Deathstroke, the DCEU Deathstroke, who might be great. He probably will be, although the DCEU hasn't been really getting their characters right. So Deathstroke, who knows, he might be great, but even if he is, that's not a fair trade. So I just went on a 9-minute rant about this whole thing. It's just because it really makes me angry that the reason we don't see more of Deathstroke, the Suicide Squad, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, Shazam, Blue Beetle, Zatanna, Dr. Fate, all of these characters never show up because they're quote-unquote saving them for the movies, which 100% makes me angry. It makes me really angry because the Arrowverse, as big as it is, doesn't feel complete without Batman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and all these characters. it doesn't feel complete as big as it is. So the fact that they're not letting them use these characters because they think that their audiences are a bunch of idiots makes me angry. But what do you think about this whole thing? Let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.